Pushpin disclaimer: this story is a work of creative nonfiction, inspired by real emotions and personal experiences. While the names, locations, and certain details have been altered or fictionalized to protect identities, the emotional truth of the events remains intact. This narrative touches on sensitive topics such as infidelity, emotional trauma, and family secrets. Reader discretion is advised. This story is not intended to assign blame or promote judgment, but rather to explore the quiet burdens people carry and the lasting effects of hidden truths on relationships. If you have faced similar experiences, please know you are not alone, and seeking help, support, or simply someone to talk to is always okay. Part 1: A weight I've carried alone. There are secrets we keep because we want to protect others, and then there are secrets we keep because we don't know how to live with them ourselves. What I'm about to share is one I've never spoken out loud. Not to my closest friends. Not to my partner. Not even to a therapist. It's just been mine. A secret stitched into my skin, hidden behind every smile, every memory that tries to convince me we were a normal, happy family. Growing up, I believed I had the kind of father others wished for. Kind. Thoughtful. The kind who'd show up at school plays even if he had a meeting. The kind who brought flowers for mom on random Tuesdays. We weren't rich or perfect, but we were whole, or so I thought. I held on to that version of my family like a child clutches a favorite toy, unwilling to let it go even when it begins to fall apart. But everything changed the day I stumbled upon something I wasn't meant to see. I was 16, old enough to understand, too young to process. And from that moment, my relationship with my father transformed in a way that can't quite be explained. I didn't lose him entirely. But I stopped seeing him the way I used to. He became two people, the father I had always loved, and the man who carried a truth he asked me to bury with him. This story isn't about rage or revenge. It's not about exposing someone or causing shame. It's about the slow erosion of trust, the confusion of loyalty, and the silence that can echo louder than screams. Sometimes, the hardest thing isn't what someone does to you, it's what they ask you to carry afterward. For years, I've questioned whether keeping his secret made me a coward. Or worse, an accomplice. But I've also wondered what would have happened if I had told. Would it have destroyed my family? Broken my mother's heart? Or just shifted the pain from my chest to hers? This is not a confession. It's not an apology either. It's simply the truth, or at least, my truth. The truth of a child who grew up too fast in the moment it took to read a single message on a glowing screen. And ever since then, I've carried that moment like a stone in my pocket, always there, always heavy. Now, for the first time, I'm laying it down. If you had asked me back then, I would have said I came from a perfectly normal family. Not perfect, but normal, and to a child, that difference doesn't matter much. We weren't rich, but we were never without. Our home was modest but warm. Laughter wasn't a rare thing in our house, and Sunday dinners were sacred. Mom would hum while she cooked. Dad would water the plants or read the newspaper out loud. It felt like something out of a storybook. We were the kind of family that posed for pictures with genuine smiles. Birthdays were never missed. Even if we didn't always get what we wanted, we got what we needed: attention, love, security. And for a child, that's enough to feel safe. My mother was the emotional center of our house, kind but firm, always organized, always a step ahead of everything. She was the kind of mom who remembered everyone's birthdays, sent thank you cards, and could tell if something was wrong just by looking at you for 3 seconds. My father, on the other hand, was quiet but present. Not overly affectionate, but never absent either. He'd help with school projects, crack dry jokes during car rides, and had this way of making you feel that whatever he said, he meant. Looking back now, I realize how much we believe what we want to believe, especially when it comes to the people we love. I never questioned the little things. Like why Dad would sometimes be late without explanation. Or why he had a separate phone he called his work line. Or the way his eyes occasionally lingered on some distant thought when he thought no one was watching. But when you grow up in a stable-looking home, you don't look too hard for cracks. You don't want to. You start to think those cracks are part of the design. I believed my parents loved each other. I believed in the life they built. And most of all, I believed in my father. There were signs, of course, always are. Small things. Things you only realize in hindsight. Like the faint perfume that wasn't my mother's. The extra dry cleaning receipts. The occasional overnight conference trips. But at that age, those pieces don't come together into a picture. They just float around, harmless, until one day, they snap into place, and everything changes. I sometimes wonder if my mom ever suspected. She was sharp, intuitive, surely, she must have felt something. But she never said anything, never confronted anything in front of me. Maybe she was protecting me. Or maybe she, too, was choosing the version of life that was easier to live with. For me, that illusion shattered in an instant. But before that day, before that message, before the confrontation, I was just a kid in a normal family. Happy. Naive. And entirely unprepared for what I was about to find. Some moments come quietly, without warning, like a breeze slipping through a window. And some hit like a slap in the face, cold and sudden. The day I found out about my father's secret started like any other. It was a Saturday afternoon, sometime in early spring. I was 16, buried in exam stress and boredom. My own phone had stopped working, so I asked Dad if I could use his to message a friend about a study session. He handed it over casually, no hesitation, no flicker of panic in his eyes. That's the part that still haunts me. He didn't even think twice. I remember holding his phone in my hand, scrolling through apps to find the messaging app one needed. But instead, my thumb brushed against something else, an open email, or maybe a chat thread. I didn't mean to open it, but I did. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I was careless. Maybe deep down, I already knew something was off. The message was short. Playful. Intimate. Miss you already, last night was perfect. Same time next week? The sender's name was saved under something generic, Sam HR, but it was obvious. This wasn't business. This wasn't friendship. This was something else. My stomach twisted. My breath caught in my throat. At first, I thought I was mistaken. Maybe it was a joke? Maybe I was misreading? But curiosity, fear, and disbelief pushed me to read more. A few scrolls revealed the truth. Photos. Messages with heart emojis. Details of places they'd been. A life I knew nothing about. A version of my father I had never imagined. I just sat there, frozen. I felt like I had touched something I wasn't meant to, a live wire running beneath the surface of everything I thought was safe. My heart pounded in my ears. I remember staring at the screen, the brightness blurring with the tears I didn't even realize were forming. When he walked back into the room, I snapped the phone shut so fast I nearly dropped it. He looked at me and smiled. The same smile I'd known all my life, warm, tired, trusting. I didn't say anything. Not then. The rest of the day felt like I was walking through a fog. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt real anymore. Every word Dad said sounded rehearsed. Every hug felt like a lie. I watched him laugh at dinner, talk to Mom like nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. Something inside me had cracked, and once cracked, you can't unbreak it. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, the weight of what I'd seen pressing down on my chest. I kept replaying the words. The messages. His face. And one question kept echoing in my head, why? The discovery wasn't just about infidelity. It was about betrayal, not just of my mother, but of me. Of the child who trusted him. Of the love that once felt unshakable. And I knew, from that moment on, things would never be the same. I lasted 3 days. 3 days of pretending everything was normal. 3 days of listening to my father's voice and wondering how many lies it held. 3 days of watching my mother laugh at his jokes, clueless. 3 days of burning up from the inside out. By the third night, I couldn't take it anymore. It was late. The house was quiet. Mom had already gone to bed. I found him in the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water like nothing was wrong, like the earth hadn't shifted under my feet. I stood there in the doorway, fists clenched, heart racing, unsure of the words until they came out like vomit. Who is she? The glass in his hand stopped midair. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, not yet. But in recognition. He knew exactly what I was talking about. He didn't play dumb. Didn't pretend. He just sighed and set the glass down. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He just looked at me like a man staring down a truth he'd hoped would never catch up to him. You weren't supposed to see that, he said quietly. I felt my throat tighten. That sentence was worse than any denial. Because it wasn't an apology, it was a confirmation. The truth was real. My father, my hero, had betrayed my mother. And he had no excuse. How long? I asked. He looked away. A while. That vague answer stung. A while. Like it was just a thing, a passing inconvenience. But I pressed. Does Mom know? He shook his head. No. And she doesn't need to. My voice rose. Are you serious? You're just going to keep lying to her? He stepped forward, his tone suddenly firmer. This isn't your burden. I made a mistake, I'm not proud of it. But I don't want it to destroy our family. I'm ending it. I swear. I need you to keep this between us. That was the moment the real betrayal happened. Not when I found the messages. Not when he confirmed it. But when he asked me, his child, to be his shield. To become the keeper of a secret that didn't belong to me. I stood there, torn. He was still my father. The man who tucked me in, who held my hand across the street. But now he was also the man who had lied to my mother. And worse, who was asking me to help him lie. Please, he said, his voice softer now. Your mother would never recover from this. I've made mistakes, but I still love her. I love you. Don't let this break everything. I nodded. Not because I forgave him. Not because I understood. But because I didn't know what else to do. I was 16. I was scared. I was hurt. And I didn't want to be the one who lit the match and watched our family burn. So, I made the worst kind of promise, the kind you keep not out of love, but out of fear. And just like that, it became our secret. His sin. My silence. They say silence can be peaceful. But when you're holding someone else's sin in your chest, silence feels more like a scream with no sound. After that night in the kitchen, nothing was the same, even though everything looked like it was. My father went back to being dad. Joking at the dinner table. Fixing the car on Sundays. Kissing my mother on the cheek like his lips weren't stained with guilt. And I went back to being the good kid. I said my please and thank you. I got decent grades. I smiled in family photos. But inside, something in me had died. It's strange how a secret can change your reflection. I began to feel like a stranger in my own skin. I avoided long conversations with my mom, too afraid my eyes would give something away. I avoided being alone with my dad, the weight of what I knew too heavy for eye contact. Even with my friends, I drifted. Their problems, crushes, exams, weekend plans, felt small compared to the moral earthquake happening inside me. I became quiet. Not in a dramatic, cry for help kind of way, just quieter. I stopped laughing as much. I stopped trusting people as easily. I started carrying this quiet anger, and I didn't even know who it was for. Him? Her? Myself? Every night, I'd hear my parents talking in the next room, and I'd wonder, how does she not know? How can he lie so easily? And every morning, I'd wonder, how long do I keep this up? When do I get to stop pretending? But the thing about silence is, the longer you keep it, the heavier it gets. It doesn't stay tucked away. It grows. It seeps into everything, the way you talk, the way you think, the way you love. There were days I wanted to tell her. I'd watch my mother cook, hum a tune, laugh at a TV show, and I'd feel the guilt claw at me like a trapped animal. She deserves to know, I'd think. You're lying to her too now. But then I'd hear my father's voice in my head, pleading, scared. Don't let this break everything. So I stayed silent. 4 months. Then years. The hardest part wasn't even keeping the secret. It was living in the space between loyalty and betrayal. To keep his secret felt like betraying her. To tell her felt like destroying him. Either way, I lost a piece of myself. At school, I started writing journals, stories, poems, anything to get the noise out of my head. But I never wrote about that. I couldn't. Because if I wrote it, it would become real again. And I was already living it once every day. Some people say time heals all wounds. But secrets? They don't heal. They rot. Quietly. From the inside out. And by the time I realized how much it had changed me, I wasn't even sure who I was without it. There comes a moment, sometimes sudden, sometimes painfully slow, when the dam finally cracks. When the weight of carrying something alone becomes heavier than the fear of letting it go. For me, that moment came during a completely ordinary dinner. We were sitting at the table, the three of us. My mother had made her famous chicken curry, and my father was talking about something he'd read in the news. I wasn't even listening. I was just watching them. Watching how easily he lied. Watching how effortlessly she trusted him. Watching this beautiful illusion of a family play out in front of me. And then she laughed. Not a polite laugh. A real one. The kind of laugh that comes when you feel safe, when you believe the people around you are who they say they are. And something inside me snapped. I stood up from the table without a word. My chair scraped against the floor. Both of them looked up, startled. Are you okay? Mom asked. I couldn't answer. My throat was tight. My fists were clenched. My eyes, burning. I could feel my father watching me closely, calculating. I'm going out, I said, grabbing my jacket. Where? My dad asked sharply. It wasn't concern. It was fear. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I saw not my father, but the man who had turned me into a vault. A silent accomplice. And all I wanted to do in that moment was scream the truth at the top of my lungs. I can't keep doing this, I whispered. Not to him. Not to her. To myself. I left the house and wandered. No destination. Just movement. I ended up at a park bench in the dark, heart pounding, thoughts spiraling. What would happen if I told her? Would she fall apart? Would she blame me? Or worse, would she stay, and I'd be forced to watch her forgive him? What would happen if I didn't tell her? Would I carry this forever? Would it infect my future? My relationships? Would I ever trust anyone again? I cried. Quietly. The kind of crying that doesn't look like much but feels like it could tear your lungs out. I wasn't just grieving a secret, I was grieving the father I thought I had, the childhood I thought was pure, the sense of safety I once took for granted. That night, I didn't return home until after midnight. When I walked in, the lights were off. But I knew he was awake. I could feel it, the weight of his guilt vibrating in the silence. We never spoke about that dinner again. But something had shifted. I stopped pretending. My tone changed. My eyes stayed cold. The small laughs, the casual affection, all of it disappeared. I hadn't told anyone the secret. But in a way, it had already destroyed something. The bond we had, once silent, safe, unshakable, had shattered. And all that was left was distance, and the unbearable noise of everything left unsaid. Time passed. As it always does. I went to college. Moved to another city. Built a new life, or at least tried to. From the outside, everything looked good. I had a job. A partner. Friends. Stability. But inside me, that old silence still echoed. It's strange, how something that happened so long ago can follow you like a shadow. I didn't talk about it. Not to friends. Not even to the person I was in love with. Every time I thought about opening up, something inside me froze, like the moment I did, I'd be betraying someone again. You see, secrets don't just sit still. They grow legs. They change shape. They wrap themselves around your values, your trust, your ability to let people all the way in. I started noticing how guarded I was. How quick I was to doubt sincerity. How terrified I was of the phrase "I promise," because I had learned, early and deeply, that people break promises. Even the ones who love you. Especially the ones who love you. My father and I drifted. Not through arguments or anger, but through space. Through 1,000 tiny silences. He still called sometimes. Asked about work. Sent birthday messages. But the warmth was gone. I couldn't bring myself to speak to him the same way. I answered his questions, but never volunteered anything. Our bond, once based on trust, now stood on the cracked ground of a deal I never agreed to. And my mother? She never found out. Or maybe, she did. Maybe she sensed something and chose to look away. Some silences in her eyes still make me wonder. But she never asked. And I never told. That unspoken pact hung between us, heavy, delicate, cruel. What I carry most, even today, is the guilt. Not for keeping the secret, but for becoming the version of myself that secret created. I became someone who watches closely, always waiting for the catch. I second-guess kindness. I brace myself before trusting. Love, for me, became a thing that could shatter without warning. There's a kind of loneliness in knowing something that no one else does. Especially when that something rewrote the definition of family for you. It made me wonder, more than once, if anything in my childhood had been real. If the memories I held on to were truth, or carefully placed furniture in a room built on lies. And yet, I never told anyone. Until now, until these words, these pages. Maybe it's not too late to say it out loud. Maybe writing it here, anonymously, is a way of reclaiming my voice. Because secrets survive in silence. But truth, no matter how painful, breathes in light. I've carried this for years. I'll probably carry it forever. But maybe, finally, I'm ready to stop carrying it alone. It's a question I've asked myself more times than I can count. Would I do it differently? Would I have told my mother the truth that night? Would I have forced my father to confess? Would I have refused to carry the weight of his betrayal on my 16-year-old shoulders? The honest answer? I don't know. Back then, I was just a kid. A scared, heartbroken kid who thought keeping the secret was the only way to keep the family together, the only way to protect my mother, my childhood, whatever image of normal I had left. But now, with the distance of years and the wisdom that only pain can give, I can see things more clearly. I know now that I protected the wrong person. That in trying to hold my family together, I let myself fall apart. That silence isn't strength, it's survival. And survival isn't always noble. I think often about my mother, what she would have done if she had known. Maybe she would have left him. Maybe she would have forgiven him. Maybe they would have fallen apart, or maybe they would have rebuilt from scratch. I'll never know. But what I do know is that she deserved the choice. And I took that away from her. I became a co-conspirator in a betrayal that wasn't mine. I never cheated. I never lied. But I helped maintain the illusion. I helped him keep it buried. And that has haunted me more than the secret itself. So, yes. If I had the chance again, I think I would speak. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. But out of love. Love for the version of myself that deserved to be free of that weight. Love for a mother who deserved the full truth of her life. Even love for my father, because maybe, if he had been forced to face what he did, he might have become someone better. Would it have hurt? Yes. Would it have broken things? Possibly. But sometimes, things need to break before they can be rebuilt honestly. Still, I don't hate my father. It took me a long time to reach that place, but I finally see him as a flawed man, not a villain. He made a terrible choice. He asked me to protect him when he should have protected me. But he was human. Weak. Afraid. And that, too, is part of the truth. Now, as an adult, I understand that life is messy. That love is complicated. That sometimes we make decisions not because they're right, but because they're the only ones we know how to make in the moment. And maybe that's the grace I can finally give myself. I didn't ruin the family. He did. I just tried to survive it. And now, after all these years, I'm finally letting the story breathe, not for revenge. Not for pity. But because every secret deserves an ending. And this is mine.